to Artisan Eats and our exciting new chapter. The crystal glasses clinked, a delicate music filling the opulent private dining room at the Gilded Spoon, one of Boston's most exclusive and sought-after restaurants. I offered a genuine smile as Marcus Thorne, the formidable lead investor at Apex Ventures, raised his glass with an enthusiasm that seemed to crackle in the air. After months of grueling negotiations, tense meetings, and sleepless nights poring over projections, I'd finally secured the $8 million investment. This capital infusion was the key to taking Artisan Eats, my family's specialty food business, from a cherished local name to a national brand. The vintage champagne, a celebratory gift from Mr. Thorne himself, flowed freely. The investors from Apex Ventures were beaming, their faces reflecting the promise of significant returns. And my parents, Eleanor and Robert Pierce, looked happier, more genuinely relaxed, than I'd seen them in what felt like a lifetime. My name is Olivia Pierce. I am 35 years old. 8 years ago, I made a decision that stunned everyone who knew me. I walked away from what could have been a distinguished culinary career, a path I'd started to forge after graduating from the prestigious Culinary Institute of America, to save my parents' struggling gourmet food business, the precursor to what Artisan Eats had become. I had then poured myself into learning business from the ground up, devouring books, attending seminars, and teaching myself everything from financial modeling to supply chain management. Most people, including some of my family, thought I was utterly crazy to trade the stability of a burgeoning career for a small, debt-ridden family business that was, by all accounts, about 3 agonizing months from complete bankruptcy. But where they saw only crushing risk and inevitable failure, I saw a glimmer of precious potential. A spark that I believed my passion for food and newfound business skills could fan into a roaring flame. I remember when your parents' business was just that charming little storefront over in Cambridge, a true hidden gem, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, my beloved former instructor from the CIA and now a trusted mentor, said warmly. Dr. Hayes had been instrumental in introducing me to Mr. Thorne and the Apex Ventures team, her faith in me unwavering. And now, Olivia, just look at this incredible achievement. Her eyes twinkled with pride. National distribution on the horizon, a thriving online subscription model that you built from scratch, and those innovative manufacturing partnerships you forged. It's a truly remarkable transformation, my dear. A warm glow of deep, hard-earned pride spread through my chest as Mr. Thorne and the other investors nodded in genuine appreciation at Dr. Hayes's words. The journey to this celebratory dinner had been anything but easy. It was paved with sacrifice and relentless effort. I'd completely restructured the company's chaotic operations, a task that nearly broke me in the early days. I'd meticulously rebranded our entire product line, breathing new life into old family recipes while introducing my own innovative creations. I'd personally cultivated and secured pivotal strategic partnerships that opened doors we'd never dreamed of. And I'd single-handedly built our e-commerce platform from the ground up, often working late into the night, fueled by coffee and sheer determination. Artisan Eats had blossomed from a much-loved but financially precarious local shop into a budding national brand, a testament to a vision I'd clung to. Our specialty jams, artisanal condiments, and gourmet food baskets were now shipping to customers in 48 states, each package a symbol of resilience. None of this, absolutely none of this, would have been possible without Olivia's extraordinary vision and unwavering dedication, my father, Robert Pierce, said, his voice thick with emotion as he raised his glass. When Eleanor and I started our little shop all those years ago, 25 years now, we never, ever imagined it could become what it is today. My mother, Eleanor, nodded beside him and offered a polite, almost regal smile. But then, a fleeting, almost imperceptible shadow flickered across her usually composed face, a micro-expression of hesitation, of something unsaid, that I recognized with a familiar, sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. It was a look I knew far too well. As Mr. Thorne and his partners began to enthusiastically discuss the detailed expansion plans I'd meticulously prepared and presented over countless meetings, I felt my mother's hand, cool and manicured, slip into mine beneath the heavy linen tablecloth. Her fingers gave mine a light squeeze. "Olivia, dear," she whispered, her voice a low, conspiratorial murmur. She leaned in close, so close that her expensive signature perfume, a scent I often associated with unspoken disapproval, enveloped me like a suffocating cloud. This is all terribly exciting, of course. Her eyes, however, didn't quite meet mine. A wonderful achievement for you. A beat of silence, then the familiar, dreaded pivot. But you must remember, Olivia, when Ethan returns from his program next month, with his prestigious MBA from Sterling Business School, he'll naturally be better suited to be CEO for the family business at this new, expanded scale. My breath caught in my throat, a silent gasp of disbelief and fury. You've done some wonderful groundwork, truly, laid a very nice foundation, she continued, patting my hand as if placating a child. But Ethan, well, he has the right kind of formal education and background for this level of leadership, don't you think? My brother, Ethan. My older brother, the golden child, the one for whom the bar was always inexplicably lower and the praise inexplicably higher. He'd been leisurely traveling through Europe for the past year. A celebratory jaunt after finally completing his MBA, a degree he'd pursued while I was wrestling with creditors and payroll for Artisan Eats. He'd barely bothered to check in on the family, let alone the business I'd been painstakingly rebuilding with my own blood, sweat, and tears. Not to mention my own savings in the early days. I forced my smile to remain firmly, almost painfully, in place, a carefully constructed mask of polite attentiveness. I even managed to squeeze my mother's hand back, a gesture I hoped conveyed a calm understanding I was far from feeling. Inside, however, a bitter, familiar ice was rapidly forming in my stomach, spreading a chilling numbness through my veins. 8 long years of grueling 18-hour days. 8 years of skipped holidays, postponed dreams, and a personal life put on indefinite hold. And still, after all of that, after all I had accomplished, she saw me as nothing more than the temporary caretaker. The diligent placeholder for Ethan's God-given birthright. The thought was a fresh stab to an old, festering wound. Suddenly, Mom pulled her hand away and reached into her expensive handbag that sat on the empty chair beside her. Speaking of your accomplishments, Olivia, she said, her voice a little too bright, a little too loud, I have something for you. A little something to mark this special occasion. She produced a slim, elegant box from a very well-known, very expensive brand of Swiss watches, a brand Ethan particularly favored. My heart began to pound. You're a CEO now, dear, and you should have a proper timepiece. She opened the box with a flourish, revealing a stunning, unmistakably masculine and incredibly expensive-looking wristwatch nestled on a satin cushion. It was a classic, sporty chronograph, the kind that screamed a successful executive male. I recognized the model instantly. Ethan had coveted one for years. This is a brand Ethan is quite fond of, you know, Mom added, as if that detail somehow made it appropriate for me. I thought it would be suitable. My mind reeled. The sheer, breathtaking insensitivity of it, the blatant display of her favoritism, hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a gift for me, this was a gift she had intended for Ethan, now repurposed with a casual, dismissive wave of her hand. My carefully constructed composure threatened to crack. Rage, hot and sharp, surged through me, mixed with a wave of such profound disappointment it almost made me nauseous. I wanted to scream, to demand how she could be so blind, so cruel. Instead, I took a slow, deliberate breath. I pasted on an even wider, brighter smile. Thank you, Mom, I managed to say, my voice miraculously steady. It's quite a watch. A very generous gesture. My fingers closed around the cool, heavy metal of the watch. Under the guise of admiring it, I discreetly angled my smartphone beneath the table, my thumbs flying across the screen. A quick search confirmed its staggering price, easily tens of thousands of dollars, and its explicit marketing towards men. The evidence was irrefutable, a cold, hard confirmation of what I already knew deep in my bones. I carefully placed the watch, still in its box, on the table beside my plate, pushing it slightly away. Everything okay, Olivia? Mr. Thorne asked, his sharp eyes missing nothing. He had clearly noticed the exchange, the tension in my smile, the way my mother had presented the gift. A flicker of concern crossed his otherwise impassive face. Absolutely perfect, Mr. Thorne, I replied, my voice a little too bright, a little too brittle. I raised my champagne glass a little higher, the crystal stem cool against my trembling fingers. Just perfect. But behind that forced smile, behind the carefully maintained facade of gratitude and composure, the gears in my mind were already turning. Grinding with a furious, determined energy. A plan, audacious and risky, was beginning to take shape. Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. 8 long years ago, I had been a passionate, if somewhat naive, recent graduate of the Culinary Institute of America. Eager to make my mark in the demanding world of professional kitchens. I just landed a promising position at a well-regarded restaurant in New York City when my father, his voice strained and heavy with unshed tears, called with news that shattered my carefully laid plans and changed the trajectory of my life irrevocably. The family business, then a charming but woefully mismanaged gourmet food shop, was failing, teetering on the very brink of collapse. My parents, bless their hearts, were wonderful artisans of food but possessed little to no business acumen. They'd overextended themselves financially with a disastrous second location, a decision made with more hope than strategy. The subsequent recession had hit their niche luxury food items particularly hard, a perfect storm of bad timing and poor planning. They were, he'd choked out, a mere 3 months from having to close their doors permanently. Losing everything they had worked for their entire lives. I can still vividly remember the bewildered, almost pitying reactions of my culinary mentors and peers when I announced I was resigning from my hard-won restaurant job. "You're leaving a rising career in fine dining to go back home and sell fancy jam?" Olivia, my then head chef, had asked. His voice laced with thinly veiled incredulity. He clearly thought I was throwing my future away. Even Ethan, my brother, then still dithering his way through his undergraduate degree with no clear direction, had questioned my decision with his characteristic casual dismissiveness. "It's a sinking ship, Olivia," he'd said over a crackling long-distance call, his tone implying I was being foolishly sentimental. "Honestly, just let it go. Help Mom and Dad find something else to do, something less stressful." But I couldn't just let it go. It wasn't in my nature, especially not then. The business, which would eventually be reborn as Artisan Eats, wasn't just a shop filled with gourmet products, it was the repository of my parents' dreams, their life's work, their very identity. It was my childhood, steeped in the aroma of my grandmother's recipes, which she had lovingly passed down to me. I'd grown up watching them, my hands often covered in flour or stained with berry juice, as they painstakingly crafted new recipes, passionately sourced the finest ingredients from small, local family farms, and tenderly built genuine personal relationships with every single customer who walked through their door. When I walked away from the exciting, albeit exhausting, path of a professional chef, I wasn't just attempting to save a floundering business, I was desperately trying to preserve a precious family dream. A legacy of flavor and love that I felt was woven into the very fabric of my being. The first 2 years were an unrelenting, brutal trial by fire. I poured every ounce of my energy, every waking moment, into the fight. I worked the front counter during the long days, charming customers and taking orders, my feet aching by lunchtime. Then, late into the dead of night, I'd hunch over chaotic spreadsheets and supplier invoices, a solitary lamp casting long shadows in the quiet stockroom, desperately trying to make sense of the tangled finances. I made the painful but necessary decision to sell the ill-fated second location. A move that caused my parents considerable distress but stemmed the financial bleeding. I personally renegotiated every single supplier contract, often armed with nothing but sheer tenacity and freshly baked cookies as a bargaining chip. I painstakingly modernized their archaic, paper-based accounting systems, dragging the business, kicking and screaming, into the 21st century. There were terrifying moments when I thought we wouldn't make it. I took out a risky second mortgage on my small condo, my only real asset, to fund the development of our very first rudimentary e-commerce platform. Then, for 6 long, soul-crushing months, when cash flow was so tight I couldn't possibly cover both the mortgage and my own rent, I slept on a lumpy cot in the dusty, cramped stockroom, surrounded by boxes of unsold inventory, the scent of spices and fear my constant companions. Meanwhile, Ethan, after finally graduating, took an entry-level position at a generic consulting firm, Stratton Consulting, I think it was called. He'd occasionally call and offer unsolicited, often unhelpful, advice from the lofty sidelines. His pronouncements peppered with business jargon he just learned, but he was, as he frequently reminded us, far too busy building his own impressive career to get his hands dirty with the messy reality of the struggling family business. My parents, Eleanor and Robert, never seemed to mind his conspicuous absence or his distinct lack of tangible support. They were always remarkably quick to excuse him, to proudly point out how he was gaining invaluable experience and making important connections that would, someday, in some unspecified future, greatly benefit Artisan Eats. Their pride in him, so freely given for so little effort, was a constant, dull ache in my heart. While Ethan was gaining experience, I was transforming the business, brick by painful brick. Our meticulously handcrafted preserves, made from my grandmother's updated recipes, caught the discerning attention of a prominent food blogger. Her subsequent glowing post went unexpectedly viral, and suddenly, our little shop was on the map. I seized that precious, fleeting exposure with both hands, leveraging it to launch a subscription box service. It started small, with just a few dozen loyal customers, but through relentless marketing and a focus on quality, it now boasted over 20,000 eager monthly subscribers across the country. Last year, a major turning point. I personally negotiated and secured lucrative partnerships with 3 highly respected national gourmet grocery chains. A move that increased our annual revenue by an astonishing 340%. We were finally, blessedly, profitable and growing. Yet, through all of this relentless effort, through all these tangible, measurable successes, my parents remained curiously, frustratingly ambivalent about my contributions. They were grateful, certainly, in their own reserved way. I saw it in their eyes sometimes, a flicker of relief, perhaps even pride. But there was always an unspoken, underlying current of, "This is just temporary," in their praise. A subtle but persistent insinuation that my role was merely that of a placeholder. Ethan, the firstborn, the only son, would eventually return, MBA in hand, to take his rightful place at the helm. It was an unspoken, unshakable family assumption, a silent decree that no amount of my dedication, my sacrifice, or my hard-won success ever seemed to alter. The weight of that assumption felt heavier tonight than ever before. "Olivia?" Mr. Thorne's calm, resonant voice pulled me sharply back from the turbulent waters of my memories to the opulent, hushed presence of the Gilded Spoon's private dining room. I blinked, realizing with a flush of embarrassment that the entire table of investors was looking at me expectantly. A polite but definite question hanging in the air. I had clearly missed something important. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Thorne," I said, hastily composing myself, forcing a professional smile. My heart was still hammering from Mom's earlier pronouncements and the insulting gift of the watch, which now sat like a ticking accusation on the table. My mind was elsewhere for a moment. "Could you possibly repeat that?" "Certainly," Mr. Thorne said, his expression unreadable but his eyes keen. "I was asking about your specific vision for Artisan Eats' leadership structure moving forward, particularly with this new phase of expansion." He paused, then added, "Your operational plan is exceptionally thorough, Olivia, quite frankly one of the best I've seen. But I want to ensure we're all perfectly aligned on the critical aspect of management and long-term governance." The question, though phrased with diplomatic precision, landed with the weight of a judgment. It hung palpably in the suddenly still air as my mother, Eleanor, visibly tensed beside me, her back straightening almost imperceptibly. Her earlier, whispered words about Ethan now echoed ominously in my mind. This was it. This was the moment I had been simultaneously dreading and, in a strange, perverse way, anticipating for 8 long, arduous years. The moment the unspoken would finally have to be spoken. "The leadership structure, Mr. Thorne," I began, my voice carefully measured, betraying none of the turmoil raging within me. Acutely aware of my mother's hawk-like eyes boring into my profile. "Will remain largely as it is currently, ensuring stability and continued execution of our proven strategies." I met his gaze directly, hoping to project an unwavering confidence I didn't entirely feel. "I will, of course, continue in my role as CEO, guiding the company through this exciting expansion." My parents, I added, gesturing towards them with a polite inclination of my head, will continue to serve as invaluable brand ambassadors and trusted advisors, helping to preserve the authentic family story and heritage that our customers so deeply connect with. Mr. Thorne nodded slowly, his pen making a few deliberate strokes in the leather-bound notebook open before him. A thoughtful silence ensued before he spoke again. "And what about your brother, Olivia?" he inquired, his tone neutral but his gaze direct. "Eleanor mentioned earlier that he's recently completed an MBA program at Sterling Business School, I believe?" Before I could even formulate a carefully diplomatic response, my mother jumped in, her voice smooth and confident, seamlessly taking control of the narrative. "Yes, indeed. Ethan has just successfully completed his executive MBA at Sterling, a truly excellent program," she announced proudly, beaming at the investors as if presenting a royal heir. "He'll be joining the leadership team at Artisan Eats next month, bringing a wealth of valuable new perspectives from his extensive consulting experience at top-tier firms." A familiar, bitter sting, sharp and hot, lanced through me. I struggled to keep my expression perfectly neutral, a carefully blank canvas. Extensive consulting experience? Ethan had spent exactly 3, maybe 4, brief weekends at the shop or our small production facility in the past 8 years. Usually looking bored and offering vague, unhelpful suggestions. He'd bounced between a couple of short-lived consulting gigs after college before embarking on his MBA, and as far as I knew, he was currently unemployed, enjoying his post-graduation European tour. Yet, my mother spoke as if he'd been an integral, indispensable part of our hard-won growth all along, a strategic mastermind waiting in the wings. Mr. Thorne's astute gaze shifted subtly, moving from my mother's beaming face to my carefully composed one, then back again. He was a man renowned for his perceptiveness, and he was clearly, unmistakably sensing the palpable undercurrents of tension, the unspoken family drama now threatening to spill into this high-stakes business dinner. "I see," he said, his voice giving nothing away. He paused, then directed his next question to me. "And what, specifically, will his role be within the company, Olivia?" "We haven't absolutely finalized all the details of his role just yet, Mr. Thorne," I interjected quickly, trying to regain control of the conversation, acutely aware of the dangerous ground we were on. "Our primary focus right now, as you know, has been on closing this crucial investment round and preparing for the immediate next steps of the expansion." A desperate attempt to deflect, to buy time. But my mother, unfortunately, wasn't finished. She seemed determined to cement Ethan's position in the minds of these powerful investors. "Ethan has always, since he was a little boy, had the strongest, most natural head for business in our family," she continued, her voice swelling with a fierce, almost belligerent pride. It was a statement so blatantly untrue it was almost comical, yet she delivered it with utter conviction. "Olivia," she conceded, with a magnanimous nod in my direction, "has done wonderfully, of course, with all the creative aspects, the recipes, the branding. She has a real flair for that, naturally." The faint praise felt more like a dismissal, a pat on the head. "But Ethan," she leaned forward, her voice dropping as if sharing a profound secret, "Ethan truly understands the complex financial side, the strategic big picture, in a way that will be absolutely crucial for this next, much larger, phase of expansion." I nearly choked on my champagne, a small, strangled cough escaping before I could stifle it. The irony was so thick, so suffocating, I could barely breathe. I, Olivia Pierce, who had graduated from culinary school with honors, had then single-handedly taught myself the intricacies of finance, painstakingly immersing myself in business strategy until I could debate cap tables and ROI projections with seasoned professionals. I had personally restructured our company's entire debt, navigated complex supplier negotiations, built a multi-million-dollar e-commerce business from scratch, and had just, after months of relentless effort, secured this $8 million investment, an investment Ethan knew absolutely nothing about, other than what Mom might have vaguely mentioned. Yet somehow, in my mother's unwavering, deeply biased mind, Ethan, with his newly minted MBA and virtually non-existent relevant experience, was the designated business expert, the financial savior. The injustice of it was a familiar, bitter pill. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Mr. Thorne exchange a swift, almost imperceptible glance with another senior partner from Apex Ventures seated across the table. It was a fleeting look, but it spoke volumes. Something in the atmosphere of the room shifted, a subtle but definite recalculation, a cooling of the earlier warmth. It was a change I recognized instantly from my hard-won understanding of business deals. From navigating these high-stakes negotiations where fortunes and futures were decided, they were reassessing the deal right here, right now. My heart sank. "Mrs. Pierce," Mr. Thorne said, his voice polite but edged with a new, unmistakable firmness, addressing my mother directly. "I must be very clear. Our decision to invest in Artisan Eats is largely, almost entirely, based on Olivia's proven track record, her demonstrated leadership, and her compelling vision for the company's future." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We would, naturally, need to discuss any significant proposed changes to that leadership structure in considerable detail before finalizing any aspect of our agreement." My mother looked genuinely surprised, her confident smile faltering for the first time that evening. It was as if the thought had never, ever occurred to her that these powerful, sophisticated investors might actually be backing me, Olivia, the daughter, the cook, rather than just the Pierce family name or the potential of her precious son, Ethan. My father, who had been silent and increasingly uncomfortable throughout this exchange, cleared his throat, a nervous, rumbling sound. Of course, Mr. Thorne," he said hastily, trying to smooth over the suddenly choppy waters. "We're all absolutely on the same page here, naturally." He offered a strained, placating smile. "Olivia has built something truly remarkable with Artisan Eats, and Eleanor and I are just incredibly proud parents. Thrilled and excited to have both our wonderful children involved in the family's next chapter." He waved a dismissive hand. "Nothing at all is set in stone regarding titles or anything like that, absolutely not." The conversation, thankfully, then shifted to safer, more general topics: market trends, potential new product lines, the logistics of scaling up production. But the damage, I knew with a sickening certainty, had already been done. The carefully cultivated celebratory mood had been irrevocably tainted. As the long dinner finally wound down, I noticed Mr. Thorne speaking quietly and intently with his core team members, their expressions uniformly serious, their earlier ebullience noticeably absent. When we stood to say our goodbyes at the restaurant's grand entrance, Mr. Thorne's handshake was a degree firmer than usual, his gaze even more direct as he held mine for a moment longer than necessary. "Olivia, we should talk," he murmured, his voice low and for my ears only, cutting through the polite farewells. "First thing Monday morning." He paused, then added with quiet emphasis, "Just you." I nodded, a cold dread mixing with a strange sense of resolve. "I understand, Mr. Thorne." I understood perfectly. The astute investors from Apex Ventures hadn't missed a single nuance of my mother's not-so-subtle campaign for Ethan. Nor had they overlooked the potentially disastrous implications for their $8 million investment. As my parents and I rode back to their home in the hired town car, they chatted with an almost manic excitement about Ethan's imminent return, his brilliant MBA, and all the wonderful, transformative ideas he would undoubtedly bring to Artisan Eats. They seemed completely, blissfully oblivious to the near catastrophe that had just unfolded at the dinner table. Or perhaps they were simply choosing to ignore it, lost in their shared delusion of Ethan's inevitable coronation. I stared out the window at the glittering, indifferent blur of the passing city lights, the knot in my stomach tightening with each passing mile. But beneath the anger and the hurt, a steely plan, born of years of quiet frustration and a fierce determination to protect what I had built, was already rapidly forming in my mind. Monday was going to be very, very interesting indeed. I barely slept a wink that Friday night, my mind racing, replaying every excruciating detail of the dinner with Mr. Thorne and my parents. By 6 a.m. on Saturday, a pale, watery dawn just beginning to streak the Boston sky, I was already at my desk in the silent, empty Artisan Eats headquarters. The familiar scent of spices, coffee, and old wood enveloped me, a strangely comforting embrace. I was surrounded by towering stacks of spreadsheets gleaming with financial data, meticulously detailed market analyses I'd commissioned, And 8 long years of operational documentation, the tangible proof of my labor. The weekend cleaning staff, when they arrived a short while later, looked momentarily surprised to see me there, hunched over my laptop in the dim morning light. But they'd grown largely accustomed to my unconventional, often grueling, hours over the years. They knew I practically lived and breathed artisan eats. "Ms. Pierce, is everything okay?" asked Jorge, our kind-faced head of maintenance, a man whose loyalty and quiet support I'd come to value deeply. He had been with us since the very beginning of my tumultuous tenure, a steady presence through thick and thin. "Just preparing for a rather big meeting, Jorge," I replied, not looking up from the glowing screen of my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. The numbers had to be perfect. "Another one, Ms. Pierce, after that fancy investor dinner last night?" Jorge observed, leaning on his broom with a knowing look. "You work far too hard, you know. It's not good for you." I managed a faint, weary smile despite myself. His genuine concern was a small, unexpected balm to my frayed nerves. "I appreciate the thought, Jorge, truly I do," I said, finally meeting his worried gaze. "But this one is important. Perhaps the most important meeting I've ever had in my life." After he nodded sympathetically and quietly resumed his duties, leaving me to the silence and my churning thoughts, I made a call. It was a call I'd been considering, even mentally rehearsing, for months, if not years. A call I had consistently held off on making, partly out of a misplaced sense of family loyalty, partly out of fear of the consequences. But Mom's blatant maneuverings at dinner, her casual dismissal of my entire life's work in favor of Ethan, had been the final, brutal straw. The line crackled, then a familiar, groggy voice answered, thick with sleep. "Olivia? My dear, it's barely 6:30 on a Saturday morning." Dr. Evelyn Hayes, my former culinary instructor, my cherished mentor, my rock, had always been an early riser. A whirlwind of productive energy even before sunrise. But even for her, this was pushing it. "Dr. Hayes, I am so sorry to call you this early," I said, my voice tight with urgency, dispensing with the usual preambles. "But I desperately need your advice. And, quite possibly, your help." A brief pause, then her voice, instantly alert, sharp with concern. "Olivia, what's happened?" 45 minutes later, looking remarkably composed despite the ungodly hour, Dr. Hayes walked through the door of my office. She carried 2 large coffees from my favorite local bakery and wore an expression of quiet, unwavering determination that immediately bolstered my spirits. She listened intently, without interruption, as I poured out the whole sorry tale, my mother's devastating words at the dinner, the insulting gift of the watch, Mr. Thorne's summons for a Monday meeting, my growing fear that my family was about to sabotage everything I'd fought for. When I finally finished, my voice hoarse with emotion, she sat back in her chair, her gaze thoughtful as she studied me carefully. The silence in the office was broken only by the distant hum of city traffic. "Olivia," she said at last, her voice gentle but firm, "you've been anticipating this moment, this precise confrontation, for many, many years. Haven't you?" It wasn't really a question. She knew me too well. She knew the long, painful history of my struggles within my own family. "What do you really want, Olivia?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "Not what you think you should want, or what your parents expect of you. What does Olivia Pierce truly desire?" The question, so simple yet so profound, hung heavy in the air as I considered my answer, truly considered it. Perhaps for the first time without the filter of familial obligation or fear. What did I want? Was it simply recognition from my parents, a validation that seemed perpetually out of reach? Was it just to keep the CEO position I'd already earned 10 times over, the title I already held? Or was it something more? Something deeper, more fundamental? "I want what I've earned, Dr. Hayes," I said finally, my voice surprisingly steady, a newfound clarity ringing in my words. "I want the respect that comes with that. And more than anything," I took a deep, shaky breath, "I want to stop pretending that my family, especially my mother, values my contribution, my sacrifice, or even me, in any meaningful way when it comes to Ethan." The words, once spoken aloud, felt liberating, empowering. Dr. Hayes nodded slowly, a flicker of something, understanding, empathy, perhaps even a touch of righteous anger on my behalf, in her wise eyes. "All right then, Olivia," she said, a decisive glint in her gaze. "Then let's make some important calls. It's time to fight for what's yours." By noon that Saturday, fueled by Dr. Hayes's unwavering support and several more cups of strong coffee, my counteroffensive was well underway. I'd spoken at length with Mr. Thorne, conveying my serious concerns about my family's intentions and formally requesting an emergency meeting with the entire Apex Ventures investment team for Sunday morning. He'd listened intently, asked a few pointed questions, and agreed without hesitation. I'd also called my most loyal, most trusted employees, Chloe Davis, my brilliant and energetic marketing manager, Leah Miller, my stoic and incredibly capable operations director, and Sophia Chan, my innovative and passionate head of product development. I asked them to come into the office for an urgent, confidential strategy session on Sunday afternoon. These were the people who had been with me through the darkest days, the ones who had believed in my vision when few others did. They had helped me build Artisan Eats, shoulder to shoulder, while Ethan was blithely pursuing his MBA and then gallivanting around Europe, blissfully unaware of, or perhaps indifferent to, our daily struggles. My parents, predictably, called twice that afternoon, their voices bright and full of feigned normalcy. They wanted to discuss, at great length, all the exciting new ideas Ethan had apparently shared with them over the phone for the future of Artisan Eats, ideas he'd likely gleaned from a cursory glance at some generic business article. I let both calls go straight to voicemail, a small act of defiance that felt surprisingly satisfying. This weekend, I resolved with a hardening of my heart, was not about Ethan. It was not about my parents and their outdated, biased expectations. This weekend was about me, Olivia Pierce, securing my future, the future of the company I had poured my soul into. And I would do it with or without the name Artisan Eats, if it came to that. The battle lines were being drawn. Sunday morning arrived with a heavy, ominous knot firmly lodged in my stomach. I'd barely slept more than an hour or two, my mind a relentless whirlwind of financial projections, strategic scenarios, and worst-case contingency plans that I'd been feverishly running until nearly 3 a.m. The stakes felt impossibly high. Mr. Thorne and his core Apex Ventures team, including their lead legal counsel, arrived at our modest Artisan Eats conference room at precisely 9 a.m. sharp. Their expressions were a carefully controlled mixture of professional concern and, I thought, a flicker of intrigued curiosity. "Olivia," Mr. Thorne began, his tone serious and direct as they settled around the polished mahogany table, the scent of fresh coffee I'd brewed hanging in the air. "I've been in this investment business for over 20 years now, and I've learned, often the hard way, to trust my gut instincts." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "Something happened at that celebratory dinner on Friday night, something beyond the usual family dynamics, that deeply concerns me and my team." "You're absolutely right to be concerned, Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice surprisingly calm and steady despite the tremor in my hands. I slid a set of neatly bound folders across the table, one for each member of his team. The weight of those documents felt immense. Page 1 of this dossier contains the current, accurate organizational chart of Artisan Eats, reflecting my leadership and the structure that has brought us to this point of success. I watched their faces as they opened the folders. "Page 2, I continued, my voice dropping slightly, "is what I strongly, and with good reason, suspect that organizational chart will look like if my parents, particularly my mother, have their way after your investment officially closes." The second chart was a stark, brutal illustration of my fears. It showed Ethan, my brother, prominently positioned as the new CEO of Artisan Eats. I, Olivia, was relegated to a vaguely defined creative director role, a token position with no real authority, no decision-making power. Essentially sidelined in the very company I had built from ashes. A collective frown creased Mr. Thorne's brow as he studied the damning chart. The other investors exchanged uneasy glances. "This revised structure, Olivia," he said, his voice carefully neutral but with an underlying edge of disapproval, "was certainly not what we discussed or agreed upon during our extensive negotiations." "No, Mr. Thorne," I agreed, meeting his gaze squarely. "It absolutely wasn't. But it has been the unspoken, insidious plan within my family, particularly championed by my mother. Since the day I stepped in to save this business 8 years ago, the words tasted bitter on my tongue. No matter what I achieve, no matter how much I sacrifice or succeed, Ethan is, and always will be in their eyes, the presumed heir. The rightful successor to this company. And what, pray tell, is on page 3, asked a senior partner from Apex Ventures. A sharp-eyed woman named Ms. Harrison, who I knew was their top legal mind, as she flipped forward in her folder with a decisive rustle of paper. I took a deep, steadying breath, the air feeling suddenly thin in the tense room. This was the leap of faith, the point of no return. That, Ms. Harrison, I announced, my voice clear and resonant despite the frantic beating of my heart, is my counterproposal. A profound, almost stunned, silence descended upon the conference room as the investors absorbed the contents of the third document. Their expressions shifted from concern to surprise, then to a focused, intense scrutiny. The document they held outlined a bold, audacious plan, the formation of an entirely new company structure, a new entity, potentially with a new name. That would be mine to lead, free and clear. Crucially, it was a structure that did not include my parents in any ownership or decision-making capacity. Nor did it carry the Pierce family name or its associated baggage. This is, or rather unexpected, Olivia, Mr. Thorne said finally, breaking the silence. His carefully chosen words betraying a hint of admiration mixed with his surprise. You are, in effect, proposing that Apex Ventures redirect our entire $8 million investment to this new, as yet unformed entity, which you alone would found and lead. Yes, Mr. Thorne, that is precisely what I am proposing, I confirmed, my gaze unwavering, my resolve solidifying with each beat of my racing heart. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to show you exactly why that alternative makes sound even superior. Financial sense for everyone involved in this room. The market validation for my approach, for my vision, already exists, and it's robust, I explained, clicking through a concise, data-rich presentation I had painstakingly prepared through the sleepless hours of the previous night. My voice gained strength and confidence as I presented the undeniable facts. Our rapidly growing customer base, the very people who fuel Artisan Eats' success, doesn't primarily connect with the Pierce family legacy in the way my parents mistakenly believe. They connect, passionately and loyally, with our exceptional product quality, our innovative brand story, and our commitment to authentic craftsmanship, all of which I personally conceived, developed, and relentlessly championed. The investors listened with rapt, unwavering attention as I meticulously detailed how our sales had skyrocketed under my leadership, how our brand recognition had soared, and how our customer engagement was off the charts. I showed them compelling data from recent customer surveys. Data that clearly indicated the attributes most strongly associated with the Artisan Eats brand: innovation, sustainability, authentic culinary expertise, and a genuine connection to community were all specific initiatives I had personally spearheaded. Not fading legacy elements from my parents' original, much smaller business. What about the critical manufacturing relationships, Olivia? Ms. Harrison interjected, her question sharp and practical. Wouldn't you effectively be starting from absolute zero if you were to launch a new entity, potentially losing years of established groundwork? I shook my head, a confident smile touching my lips for the first time that morning. Actually, no, I replied. Our 3 main manufacturing partners, the backbone of our production, all have contracts with renewal provisions coming up within the next quarter. I have personally cultivated and meticulously maintained those vital relationships for years, based on mutual trust and respect. I leaned forward, emphasizing my next point. They know precisely who really runs this business, who ensures quality control, and who has consistently delivered on every promise. As the intensive meeting progressed, I laid out, with passion and precision, a complete, viable business plan for this proposed new company. It was a plan that would skillfully leverage everything I had already built at Artisan Eats: the proven product lines, the established customer base, the efficient operational systems, the strong supplier network, but crucially, without the crippling family complications, the emotional blackmail, and the constant threat of internal sabotage. This is remarkably impressive and thorough work for just one weekend, Olivia, Mr. Thorne remarked when I finally concluded my presentation. A note of genuine respect in his voice. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. But I'm guessing, given the level of detail and strategic foresight, that you've been thinking about this contingency for much longer than just a couple of days. I nodded, a wry, knowing smile playing on my lips. It's been my plan B, my emergency exit strategy, for about 3 years now, Mr. Thorne, I admitted quietly. Ever since Ethan first started seriously talking about getting his MBA and returning to claim his rightful place. As my mother so delicately puts it, I've watched, year after year, how my parents treat Ethan versus how they treat me. How his minor efforts are lauded while my major achievements are often minimized or overlooked. A shadow of old pain crossed my face. I knew, deep down, that this day, this confrontation, might eventually come. I just prayed it wouldn't. After nearly 2 hours of intense, probing discussion, detailed financial scrutiny, and rigorous legal questioning, Mr. Thorne leaned back expansively in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. He looked at each member of his team, a silent communication passing between them, before turning his gaze back to me. Olivia, he said, his voice resonating with a newfound conviction, when Apex Ventures decided to make this investment. We weren't just investing in a company, in a brand, or in a set of financial projections. We invested, first and foremost, in you, in your talent, your drive, your vision, and your proven ability to execute. The Artisan Eats brand, as you've so painstakingly built it, certainly has significant value, he conceded. But let's be clear, you, Olivia Pierce, are the true visionary. The driving force who transformed it from a struggling local shop into a national contender on the verge of even greater success. He exchanged another brief, decisive glance with his team. They nodded in unison. We will, of course, need to conduct the proper and thorough due diligence on this new proposed approach, as is our fiduciary responsibility. He continued, his tone becoming more businesslike. However, speaking for myself and my partners at Apex Ventures, I am strongly inclined to support your counterproposal and redirect our investment as you've outlined. Perhaps with some mutually agreeable modifications to protect the interests of all parties involved. A tidal wave of profound, almost overwhelming, relief washed over me, so potent it nearly buckled my knees. Tears pricked at the backs of my eyes, tears I fiercely blinked away. Thank you, Mr. Thorne, I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you all. I was fully prepared to walk away from Artisan Eats with absolutely nothing, if necessary, to start over from scratch, rather than submit to what my family was planning. That, Olivia, Mr. Thorne replied, a rare, almost fatherly smile touching his lips, wouldn't serve anyone's best interest. Least of all ours as your financial partners. He paused, his expression turning serious again. But I do have one non-negotiable condition before we proceed further down this path. My heart, which had just begun to slow its frantic pace, gave another nervous lurch. You need to have one final, completely honest, and very direct conversation with your parents, Olivia, he stated firmly, before we finalize anything regarding this new entity. You must give them one last chance to fully recognize what they are about to lose, not just a successful company, but potentially their relationship with their daughter. I wanted to refuse, to scream that it was pointless, that they would never change. To spare myself the inevitable agony and heartache of yet another fruitless, soul-destroying confrontation. But I looked into Mr. Thorne's steady, expectant eyes, and I knew, with a weary certainty, that he was right. It was the honorable, though incredibly difficult, thing to do. I understand, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'll speak with them tonight. After Mr. Thorne and his Apex Ventures team departed, their expressions now cautiously optimistic, I immediately convened a meeting with my core leadership team, Chloe, Liam, and Sophia, the loyal, dedicated people who had helped me build Artisan Eats from the ground up, sharing in every triumph and every setback. I hadn't breathed a word to them about my detailed contingency plan before this moment, unsure how they would react. Fearful they might see it as a betrayal of the family business they had also poured their hearts into. or perhaps even as a sign of disloyalty to me. I laid out the entire situation with brutal honesty: my mother's relentless maneuvering to install Ethan as CEO, the insulting watch incident, the tense meeting with Mr. Thorne, and my audacious counter-proposal to start a new company, potentially leaving Artisan Eats behind. When I finished, a heavy silence filled my small office. You know, Olivia, Chloe Davis, my sharp-witted and ever-supportive marketing manager, said finally, breaking the tension with a thoughtful frown. I always kind of wondered if you had an exit strategy, a plan B stashed away somewhere. Her eyes met mine, filled with understanding. The way your parents, especially your mother, talk about Ethan, well, frankly, it felt like it was only a matter of time before something like this blew up. Liam Miller, my stoic, pragmatic operations director, a man of few words but immense capability, nodded in firm agreement. His expression unreadable but his loyalty palpable. We've worked closely with you for all these years, Olivia, he stated, his voice calm and steady. Our loyalty is to you, to your leadership, not to the Pierce family name or some outdated notion of legacy. My heart swelled with a gratitude so profound it almost choked me. Are you saying that you would actually consider coming with me? I asked, genuinely surprised and deeply moved by their immediate, unequivocal support. If I were to leave Artisan Eats and start this new venture? In a New York Minute, Olivia Sophia Chan, my brilliant and fiercely principled head of product development, exclaimed, her dark eyes flashing with passionate conviction. Tears welled in her eyes as she leaned forward. Artisan Eats is you, Olivia. Your incredible recipes, your unwavering commitment to quality, your vision for what food can be. We wouldn't want to do this, to create what we create, with anyone else leading us. She took a shaky breath. Actually, boss, Chloe chimed in, a determined glint in her eye. The three of us have already discussed this possibility many times. Late at night after you'd gone home. We figured this day might come, especially with Ethan finishing his MBA and your mother making all those comments about his brilliant future with the company. The knowledge that my team, my trusted inner circle, had not only anticipated this horrific scenario but had also proactively decided, on their own, to follow me wherever I might lead, gave me the final, powerful boost of confidence I desperately needed. This was more than I could have ever hoped for. They weren't just my employees, they were my allies, my comrades in arms, my true professional family. They recognized my value, my worth, even when my own flesh and blood so painfully, consistently, did not. That Sunday evening, as I drove to my parents' house for the dreaded confrontation, a strange, almost unnerving sense of calm settled over me. The knot of anxiety in my stomach had loosened, replaced by a steely resolve. For so many years, for virtually my entire adult life, I'd been desperately, exhaustingly fighting for their recognition. For a simple acknowledgement of my efforts. I'd been trying, with every fiber of my being, to prove my worth to them through sheer dedication, relentless hard work, and undeniable results. But now, with a sudden, painful clarity, I finally, truly understood, no amount of my success, no matter how spectacular, would ever fundamentally change how they saw me, or how they saw Ethan. My brother would always be their chosen one, their golden boy, the designated successor, regardless of his minimal contributions, his questionable capabilities, or my own proven, extensive track record of transforming their near-bankrupt shop into a thriving, multi-million-dollar enterprise. The unfairness of it still stung, but it no longer had the power to cripple me. As I pulled my car into their familiar driveway, the gravel crunching softly under the tires, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan, his name flashing on the screen. He was calling from the airport, no doubt having just landed in Boston. Hey sis, he said, his voice insufferably cheerful, brimming with unearned confidence. He always called me sis when he wanted something or was about to be particularly condescending. Just touched down at Logan. Smooth flight. AB. So, Mom mentioned something pretty vague about a big investment deal you supposedly pulled off for Artisan Eats. He chuckled, a self-satisfied sound. Sounds like the timing of my triumphant return couldn't possibly be better, eh? I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Oh, the irony was rich. Yes, Ethan, I agreed, my voice cool and even, betraying none of the storm raging inside me. The timing is, indeed, absolutely perfect. I'll see you tomorrow morning at the office. We have a lot to discuss. Tomorrow, Monday, the day when everything, absolutely everything, would change. The Sunday evening conversation with my parents, held in the familiar, slightly faded formality of their living room. Went almost exactly as I had grimly expected, every painful beat, every predictable platitude. My mother, Eleanor, was theatrically shocked, her hand flying to her chest in a gesture of wounded disbelief. That I would even consider abandoning what she dramatically termed the sacred Pierce family legacy. She spoke of tradition, of duty, of the importance of keeping the business within the bloodline. My father, Robert, ever the well-meaning but ultimately ineffectual peacemaker, wrung his hands and tried, with a desperate sort of optimism, to suggest a compromise. Perhaps, he ventured timidly, Ethan and I could somehow co-lead the company, sharing the CEO responsibilities. It was a suggestion so ludicrous, so utterly out of touch with the reality of the past 8 years, that I almost laughed out loud. Dad, I've been running this business, effectively alone, for 8 grueling years, I reminded them. My voice tight with a carefully controlled patience I was rapidly losing. I've poured my life into it. Why on earth would I suddenly need a co-leader now? Especially your son who knows next to nothing about the actual operations. Just as we're on the cusp of a massive national expansion that I orchestrated, Ethan brings fresh, dynamic perspectives from Sterling Business School. Olivia, my mother insisted, her voice rising, a stubborn, almost fanatical gleam in her eyes. And he has always possessed the strongest, most intuitive business mind in this family. It's a natural gift he has. Based on what actual evidence, Mom? I challenged, struggling to keep my voice level, to prevent the raw frustration from boiling over into outright rage. His string of short-lived consulting jobs that he quit after barely a year or two. The ones where he learned a lot of jargon but produced no tangible results. I took a deep breath, the next words laced with years of bitter resentment. Or perhaps it's based on his expensive MBA from Sterling. The one I effectively paid for by reinvesting every penny of my own meager salary back into saving this very company. While he was still trying to find himself, the accusation hung heavy in the air. It was true. My sacrifices had, in part, enabled his privileged education. My father looked genuinely pained, his gaze dropping to the Persian rug. He hated conflict, any kind of confrontation. Olivia, my dear, please try to understand our position, he pleaded, his voice soft, almost mournful. This was always the unspoken plan, the natural order of things. He looked up, his eyes filled with a helpless sort of apology. Ethan is the firstborn, Olivia. He's the son. I am 35 years old, Dad. I interrupted, my voice finally cracking, the carefully constructed dam of my composure beginning to crumble. The unfairness, the sheer, unadulterated injustice of it all, was suffocating. I have single-handedly increased this company's revenue by over 3,000% since I took the reins. I personally conceived and executed the strategy that secured an $8 million investment from one of the most respected venture capital firms in the country. Tears of anger and frustration welled in my eyes, hot and stinging. But none of that, absolutely none of that, matters to either of you, does it? Because Ethan was born first? Because he's your precious son. And I am merely your daughter? The silence that followed my outburst was deafening, profound. It stretched for what felt like an eternity, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. In that silence, I saw everything I needed to see. They had no defense, no rational argument, nothing but outdated tradition, deeply ingrained preference, and a blind, unshakable bias. The investors, Mom, Dad, I said finally, my voice now quiet, devoid of heat, filled only with a weary, chilling certainty. Apex Ventures. They are backing me, Olivia Pierce. My leadership, my vision, my track record. Not the family name, not Ethan's potential. I stood up, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. You have until tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. to be precise, to decide. You can choose to recognize that undeniable reality, to respect what I have built and who I am. Or, I paused, letting the weight of my next words sink in. You can choose to lose everything I've painstakingly created for this family. I left them then, stunned and silent in their chintz-covered armchairs. As I walked out, my gaze fell upon a large, gilt-framed family photograph from my childhood, prominently displayed above the fireplace. There we were, Ethan, beaming confidently, front and center, taking up most of the space. And me, Olivia, a small, slightly awkward girl, positioned just off to the side, almost out of frame. It had always been that way, I realized with a sudden, gut-wrenching pang of recognition. Always. I just hadn't wanted to truly see it, to accept it, until now. In the grand living room, Ethan's recently framed MBA diploma from Sterling Business School gleamed ostentatiously from its prominent place on the mahogany mantelpiece. A testament to their priorities. Monday morning arrived, dawning bright, clear, and deceptively calm. The city of Boston was slowly stirring to life, unaware of the impending storm about to break within the walls of Artisan Eats. I had meticulously arranged for Mr. Thorne and his Apex Ventures team to meet me at our office at precisely 9 a.m. I knew from long experience that my parents typically arrived around 8:30 a.m., and Ethan, with his usual flair for making an entrance, had texted the previous evening that he would be gracing us with his presence for his first official day at 8:45 a.m. The stage was set. I arrived at the Artisan Eats headquarters at 7:30 a.m., giving myself ample time to walk through the quiet, familiar spaces, to center my thoughts, and to mentally prepare for what I knew would be one of the most challenging, and potentially life-altering, days of my career. To my utter surprise, and immense gratitude, Chloe, Liam, and Sophia were already there, gathered in the small staff kitchen. A pot of fresh coffee brewing. And they weren't alone. With them were at least a dozen other key employees, from our warehouse manager to our lead graphic designer to our head of customer service, the very heart and soul of Artisan Eats. "What are you all doing here so incredibly early?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion, genuinely taken aback by their presence. Chloe, ever my energetic lieutenant, smiled warmly, her eyes shining with a fierce loyalty that brought tears to my own. "We just wanted you to know, Olivia," she said, her voice clear and strong, "that you are not alone in this. Whatever happens today, whatever decisions are made, we are with you." 100%. The simple, profound gesture of their collective support, their silent solidarity, nearly broke my carefully constructed composure. I swallowed hard, managing only a grateful, choked-up nod before retreating to the sanctuary of my office to review my notes one final, nerve-wracking time. Their presence, however, had already fortified me in a way I couldn't have anticipated. I was not fighting this battle alone. At 8:30 a.m. sharp, my parents walked in, their expressions a mixture of tension and a strange, almost defiant, determination. My mother, Eleanor, was dressed with impeccable formality, as if for a crucial state presentation or a royal audience. My father, Robert, looked tired and drawn, the emotional toll of our argument from the previous night clearly weighing heavily on him. He offered me a weak, apologetic smile, which I barely acknowledged. Then, at precisely 8:42 a.m., my brother, Ethan, strolled in. A full 12 minutes early for his supposed start time but fashionably late in his own mind. He was wearing an ostentatiously expensive, impeccably tailored Italian suit, the kind that screamed, "Look at me, I'm important," and exuded the breezy, unshakable confidence of someone who has never had to genuinely fight for recognition or earn their place in the world. He immediately began to work the room, greeting employees he barely knew, and some he'd never even met, with overly familiar handshakes, booming laughs, and grand, sweeping declarations of how incredibly excited he was to finally take the helm of the family business and lead it to glorious new heights. I watched, with a sickening mixture of anger and disbelief, from behind the glass walls of my office as he preened and pontificated, already playing the role of CEO without having earned a single, solitary moment of it. My mother beamed with unrestrained, almost worshipful pride, fluttering at his elbow. pointing out various aspects of the bustling operation to him as if he were a visiting dignitary on a royal tour. Rather than someone who should have been in the trenches with us, sleeves rolled up, for the past 8 grueling years. The sheer arrogance of it all was breathtaking. At precisely 9 a.m., as if on cue, the elevator doors at the far end of the office pinged open. Marcus Thorne walked in. Flanked by his core investment team from Apex Ventures and 2 individuals I immediately recognized as senior partners from Apex's formidable legal department. Their arrival, an imposing phalanx of dark suits and serious expressions, instantly shifted the atmosphere in the entire office. The usual Monday morning buzz died down to a hushed, expectant silence. Employees, sensing that something significant, something momentous, was about to happen, paused in their work. Their eyes darting nervously towards the unfolding drama. My mother, ever attuned to the arrival of power, hurried over to greet them, her hand graciously extended. Her most charming hostess smile firmly in place. "Mr. Thorne." "Gentlemen, madam," she purred, nodding to his legal counsel. "We are so utterly delighted and honored that you're here this morning. I'd like to take this opportunity to formally introduce you to my son, Ethan Pierce." She gestured grandly towards Ethan, who preened under the attention. "He's just returned from completing his MBA at Sterling and is eager to dash." Mr. Thorne, however, interrupted her smoothly but with an undeniable firmness that cut through her effusive greeting. "Actually, Mrs. Pierce," he said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight of authority, "while I appreciate the introduction, we're primarily here this morning to speak with Olivia." He then turned his gaze to include my parents and a visibly surprised Ethan. "Though, on reflection, I believe it would be beneficial for all of you to join us in the conference room for this discussion." The moment of reckoning, the culmination of years of simmering resentment and unspoken truths, had finally, irrevocably, arrived. The large conference room at Artisan Eats, usually a place of collaborative energy and creative brainstorming, felt charged with an almost unbearable tension as everyone slowly took their designated seats. My parents, Eleanor and Robert, and my brother, Ethan, sat stiffly on one side of the long, polished mahogany table. The formidable Apex Ventures investment team, led by Marcus Thorne, occupied the other. And I, Olivia Pierce, sat at the head of the table, a solitary figure caught in the crossfire, yet feeling a strange, unexpected surge of resolve. Years, no, decades, of unspoken family dynamics, of carefully suppressed resentments and unacknowledged sacrifices, were about to collide head-on with the cold, hard, unforgiving reality of business. Mr. Thorne opened his sleek leather briefcase and laid out several precisely stacked legal documents on the table before him. The metallic click of the briefcase latches echoed loudly in the suddenly silent room. "Before we begin," he announced, his voice calm but commanding, his gaze sweeping across the tense faces around the table, "I want to clarify something of paramount importance. Apex Ventures' decision to invest $8 million in Artisan Eats was reviewed, vetted, and ultimately approved based overwhelmingly on Olivia Pierce's exceptional leadership, her proven track record, and her compelling, well-articulated vision for this company's future." He paused, letting his words sink in, his eyes resting for a moment on me. "Our extensive due diligence process focused almost exclusively on her strategies, her operational acumen, her dedicated team, and her meticulously crafted growth plan." Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his expensive suit, a flicker of uncertainty, perhaps even annoyance, crossing his usually confident face. My mother's polite smile became fixed, almost brittle, her knuckles white as she gripped her hands in her lap. "Since our illuminating conversation on Friday evening, Olivia," Mr. Thorne continued, his gaze now firmly on me before shifting to my parents, "it has become abundantly clear to Apex Ventures that we've had to reassess our position. It appears there may be a significant, and frankly concerning, discrepancy in expectations regarding the company's future leadership and governance." My father, Robert, cleared his throat, a nervous, hesitant sound. "Well, Mr. Thorne," he began, his voice tinged with an attempt at placation, "we've always envisioned Artisan Eats as a true, collaborative family business, you see, with both our wonderful children, Olivia and Ethan, contributing their unique and complementary strengths to its continued success. With all due respect, Mr. Pierce, another senior partner from Apex Ventures, Ms. Harrison, their lead counsel, interjected smoothly but with an unmistakable edge of steel in her voice, our investment, as Mr. Thorne has clearly stated, was predicated entirely on the continuity of the existing, proven leadership. Olivia Pierce, she continued, her gaze unwavering, has demonstrated truly exceptional business acumen, transforming this company from the brink of bankruptcy into a thriving national contender. We have seen the financials. We have seen her work. Any significant, unforeseen change to that established leadership, particularly at this critical juncture of expansion, would represent a material alteration to the fundamental terms of our agreement, and would, therefore, be unacceptable to Apex Ventures. Ethan, ever confident, leaned forward, a condescending smile playing on his lips. The arrogance in his voice was galling, completely belying his utter lack of meaningful involvement in the company for the past 8 years. I can assure you, Ms. Harrison, Mr. Thorne, he declared, puffing out his chest slightly, that my executive MBA from Sterling Business School, coupled with my extensive prior consulting experience, makes me exceptionally well qualified to dash. To do what, Mr. Pierce? Mr. Thorne interrupted, his voice suddenly blunt, devoid of its earlier diplomacy. The question hung in the air like a sharply thrown dagger. To replace the very person who single-handedly saved this company from utter ruin? Mr. Thorne's voice rose slightly, each word landing like a hammer blow. To usurp the leader who, through sheer grit and brilliance, increased its valuation by over 3,000% in just 8 years? To take the reins from the individual who conceived, negotiated, and ultimately secured this very investment in the first place? An investment you were, until very recently, entirely unaware of? The room plunged into a stunned, suffocating silence. Even Ethan looked momentarily taken aback, his usual glibness deserting him. My mother's face had gone deathly pale, her eyes darting frantically between her now diminished son and the formidable figure of Marcus Thorne. We have a proposition for the Pierce family, Mr. Thorne announced into the heavy silence, his voice once again calm and measured. He slid a thick, bound folder across the polished table towards my parents. 2 distinct options, actually. His gaze was stern. I strongly suggest you review them both with extreme care and diligence. My parents, their hands visibly trembling, reached for the folder. My father's Adam's apple bobbed nervously as he opened it. Inside, nestled side by side, were 2 starkly different legal documents. The first document outlined the original investment deal, the $8 million for Artisan Eats, but with newly added, ironclad language explicitly ensuring that I, Olivia Pierce, would remain as CEO for a minimum contractual term of 5 years. It also stipulated that Ethan's role would be strictly limited to a non-executive, advisory capacity, with clearly defined boundaries and no direct reports. The second document was something else entirely, something far more radical. It was a detailed term sheet for a $10 million investment, $2 million more than the current deal, not in Artisan Eats, but in a completely new, independent company. A company that would be founded, owned, and exclusively led by me, Olivia Pierce, with absolutely no connection to the Pierce family name, their legacy, or their interference. What is this? My father finally managed to ask, his voice barely above a shocked, horrified whisper, his face ashen. That, Dad, I replied, my voice calm, steady, and filled with a newfound strength I hadn't realized I possessed, is insurance. It's a safety net. Just in case you and Mom still don't fully understand what, and who, is actually valuable about this company you claim to cherish. Ethan, his face flushing a mottled, furious red, snatched the second document from his father's trembling hands, his eyes scanning its contents with growing disbelief and outrage. You're threatening to start a competing business, he sputtered, his voice laced with incredulity, against your own family. How could you even think of such a thing, Olivia? I'm not threatening anyone, Ethan, I corrected him, my voice cold and precise. I am simply protecting the immense value that I have painstakingly created over 8 long years. Value, I might add, that you had absolutely no part in building, despite all your grand pronouncements today. My gaze hardened as I looked directly at him, years of suppressed anger finally finding their voice. Where were you, Ethan, when I was sleeping on a cot in the dusty stockroom just so I could make payroll and keep our loyal staff employed? Where were you when I was personally delivering orders late at night in my own beat-up car because we couldn't afford basic shipping fees? Where were you when I was desperately redesigning our entire product line? Testing recipes in my tiny apartment kitchen after working 12-hour shifts at the register, just to find something, anything, that would sell and keep us afloat? My mother looked utterly stricken, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrified understanding. Olivia, my dear girl, you can't possibly mean to abandon your family legacy. After all we've dash. Before I could respond, before the torrent of my own carefully suppressed emotions could fully erupt, the conference room door swung open. Chloe Davis entered, her expression resolute, her chin held high. Behind her, shoulder to shoulder, stood Liam Miller, Sophia Chen, and at least 15 other key Artisan Eats employees, the machinist from our production line, our head of quality control, our entire sales team, our social media coordinator, a silent, formidable army. Many of them had been with the company for years, through thick and thin, their loyalty unwavering. Excuse the interruption, everyone, Chloe announced, her voice clear, confident, and ringing with an unshakable conviction that filled the tense room. But there's something we, the employees of Artisan Eats, felt it was absolutely critical to make known at this moment. She took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping from my stunned parents to the Apex Ventures team, before finally resting on me with a look of fierce, unwavering support. If Olivia Pierce is forced to leave this company, or chooses to start a new one, she declared, her voice resonating with power, then we, all of us standing here today, and many more who couldn't fit in this room, will go with her. Every single one of us. A stunned silence, then the room erupted in a cacophony of shocked whispers and incredulous gasps. My parents, Eleanor and Robert, stared in utter disbelief at the assembled employees, the loyal, dedicated, beating heart of the company they had so arrogantly assumed they controlled. Ethan looked as if he'd been physically struck, his face a mask of bewildered fury. The choice, Mom, Dad, Ethan, I said quietly into the sudden, ringing silence, my voice now calm, devoid of anger, filled only with a profound, unshakable certainty, is entirely yours. You can choose to recognize what I have built, and more importantly, who built it alongside me. Or, my gaze met theirs, steady and unwavering. You can watch me walk out that door, not alone, but with everything, and everyone, that truly makes this company valuable. For nearly 10 excruciatingly long minutes, the only sound in that supercharged conference room was the faint, rustling shuffle of papers as my parents and Ethan stared at the two documents before them, their faces a kaleidoscope of conflicting emotions. Shock, anger, disbelief, and a dawning, reluctant comprehension. Marcus Thorne and his Apex Ventures team waited with a calm, almost regal patience, their expressions unreadable. The loyal employees who had come to stand with me, my true work family, remained steadfastly at the edges of the room, a silent, powerful visual reminder of where the company's true strength, its real, irreplaceable value, resided. Finally, my father, Robert, let out a long, shuddering sigh, a sound of utter, profound defeat. He slowly, deliberately, pushed the first document, the one that kept me as CEO of Artisan Eats, towards the center of the table. We'll sign this one, he said, his voice heavy, choked with a resignation that seemed to age him before my eyes. Olivia stays as CEO of Artisan Eats. My mother's lips were pressed into a thin, hard, unforgiving line, her face pale, but she gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod of agreement. The fight, I could see, had gone out of her, replaced by a stunned, bitter acceptance. Ethan looked utterly shell-shocked, his carefully constructed, entitled future crumbling into dust before his very eyes. His expensive suit suddenly seemed to hang on him, ill-fitting and absurd. A wise and prudent choice, Mr. Pierce, Marcus Thorne said, his voice devoid of triumph, merely stating a fact. He signaled discreetly to his legal team, who immediately moved forward with the necessary pens and signature pages to finalize the paperwork. 2 hours later, after a flurry of signatures, notarizations, and terse, formal exchanges, it was done. The $8 million investment from Apex Ventures into Artisan Eats would proceed as planned. But now, with explicit, ironclad contractual protections for my position as CEO. Ethan, after much face-saving bluster from my mother, would join the company, not as CEO, not even as a vice president, but as a senior advisor in the marketing department, a vaguely defined role with absolutely no real authority, no direct reports, and a clear reporting structure that positioned him firmly under Chloe, and ultimately, under me. My parents, Eleanor and Robert, would transition, as I had originally proposed, to the roles of brand ambassadors, gracefully stepping back from any and all day-to-day operations and decision-making entirely. Their reign, however indirect, was over. That was 6 long, transformative months ago. Today, Artisan Eats is not just surviving, it is thriving beyond even my most optimistic projections. Our national expansion is significantly ahead of schedule, our products gracing the shelves of discerning retailers from coast to coast. Our innovative new product lines, developed by Sophia and her incredible team, have exceeded their initial sales projections by a staggering 40%. I even found myself, much to my surprise, featured on the cover of a Food and Wine magazine as one of the year's most influential female entrepreneurs. From the outside, to the casual observer, we probably still look like a heartwarming, quintessential American success story of close-knit family entrepreneurship, a testament to tradition and hard work. The reality, as is so often the case, is far more complex, far more nuanced. I now maintain a strictly professional, almost formal, relationship with my parents and with Ethan. Our interactions are cordial, polite, but carefully limited to essential business matters, conducted primarily through email and scheduled meetings. I still attend the mandatory family dinners on major holidays, for the sake of appearances, for the sake of a fragile peace. But I no longer seek their approval, their validation, or their recognition. I have finally, blessedly, freed myself from that exhausting, soul-crushing quest. Some wounds, I've learned, don't ever fully heal, they simply become a part of the intricate, sometimes painful, tapestry of who you are. But that profound betrayal, that agonizing crucible of confrontation, also taught me something incredibly valuable. Something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. My worth, my value as a person and as a leader, is not, and never was, determined by my family's recognition, or lack thereof. My true family, the one that matters most in my professional life, is the extraordinary team of talented, dedicated individuals who stood unflinchingly behind me on that fateful Monday morning, the ones who were ready to walk away from their job security, from the familiar, all for the sake of loyalty, fairness, and a shared belief in what we could build together. My business cards might still say Olivia Pierce, CEO of Artisan Eats, a company whose history is undeniably intertwined with the Pierce family name. But the real legacy, the one I am forging every single day with my own hands, my own heart, and my own vision, alongside my incredible team, that legacy is entirely, unequivocally, and triumphantly my own. And that, I've come to realize, is more than enough.